Jai Prabhu's Hare Krishna. Vignesh
Hare
Prabhu,
Krishna.
you can move your screen a little bit, your camera down so we could see more because now we barely see your chin. Yeah, perfect. Jai Golokananda Priya, everything okay?
Yeah, everything okay.
Great. All right, well, let's hop in. We're attacking, so to speak, serving chapter 6, and we're going to go at least up to 29. So let's do like we do usually. That is, I'll read the first verse, then Vignesh, you can read the second, then Lokananda Priya can read the third, and we'll go all the way to 29, and we'll answer the questions, and then we'll read the purports and share realizations. All right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
All right. So chapter 6, text number 1. I'm using the 1972 edition. Translation. The Blessed Lord said, "One who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no work."
Verse number 2. What is called renunciation is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. For no one can become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification.
Number 3, for one who is a neophyte in the Eightfold Yoga system, work is said to be the mean. For one who has already attained to yoga, cessation of all material activity is said to be the means.
Text 4. A person is said to have attained to yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities.
Text 5. A man must elevate himself by his own mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well.
Text 6. For him who has conquered the mind is the best friend of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy.
And what's the prescribed method for conquering the mind in this age of Kali?
Chanting of the holy name.
Chanting holy
Harinam
names.
Sankirtan.
Jai. Text 7. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same.
Text 8. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or mystic when is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same.
9. A person is said to be still further advanced when he regards all the honest, well-wisher, friends and enemies, the envious, the pious, the sinner, and those who are indifferent, impartial, with an equal mind.
In other words, the devotee has no enemies, right? Text 10. A transcendentalist should always try to concentrate his mind on the Supreme Self. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness.
Text 11 and 12. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusha grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and a soft cloth. The seat should neither be too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. Yogi should then sit on it very firmly and should practice yoga by controlling the mind and the senses, purifying the heart and fixing his mind on one point.
Number 13, one should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life.
Yeah, this is yeah. Just makes me think of, comparative theology or comparative praxis, and our friends the Christians have a somewhat slightly different. I mean, we have this verse about kamosmi bharatarshaba, just on the topic of sex. Krishna says, sex that is outside, that is, within dharma, right? And we understand that there's a sort of a lower and a higher definition being, within marriage at least, and ideally, for procreation. And that is rather different from, and underlying that is the basic principle of controlling one's senses, for the sake of Krishna or Krishna consciousness. And that's rather different from a lot of talk from the Christian side, where as long as it's in marriage, then like you can engage as much as you like in sense gratification. We as Vaishnavas see that slightly differently. There's this underlying, whether brahmachari or grihastha, there's a underlying principle of restraint for the sake of higher consciousness. So this is one of the points where, in terms of practice, there's somewhat of a difference between the two schools. Sorry for adding that. No, not sorry. I think it's an important point. So who's next? You read, right? It's my turn, right? Yeah. So text number 15. Thus, practicing control of the body, mind, and activities. Yeah, there's this notion, this notion of living like a yogi, even in the Sankirtan movement, even as Vaishnavas, even within the context of Kali Yuga, and where the Yuga Dharma is obviously not Ashtanga Yoga. But again, the principle of self-control, the principle of being a yogi or yogini in the sense of not eating too much, not eating not enough, not sleeping, and having a regulated life, including sex life, is kind of unique, or at least it's definitely stressed a lot more than other theistic traditions that I've seen, where as long as you have faith in XYZ, savior, and you try, there seems to be a less of a sort of a regulated, sadhana emphasized, yogic, in the sense of sense control type of emphasis in the Abrahamic contexts or Abrahamic paradigms. So text number 15. Thus, practicing control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist attains to the kingdom of God, or the abode of Krishna, by cessation of material existence.
Text 16. There is no possibility of once becoming a yogi, O Arjun, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough.
So sorry to interrupt you, Golokananda, but when I joined, I remember, maybe Golokananda, you remember this, I often heard that Prabhupada had said that, that at the beginning of Krishna consciousness, and this is in the context of, joining an ashram, which was basically the only option available to someone who wanted to, become a devotee of Krishna. There was really only one option in the, in the 1970s and 80s, which is basically join the ashram, right? But did you ever hear Golokananda Priya this statement that Prabhupada allegedly said, that at the beginning, for the first 3 months or 1 month or whatever, you should eat so much prasadam that you waddle away like a duck?
Yeah.
You heard that one, right?
And that he
See,
gives them so much freedom. Yeah.
yeah, Golokananda Priya is actually senior to me in terms of when she joined, but we're kind of from the same generation of joining, quote unquote, and in the United States too, you know, and also, you know, hearing from people like Bir Krishna Maharaj, Prabhupada. So, I mean, Ridananda Maharaj. And so we kind of heard a lot of, you know, common things. And we take it for granted, but you know, there's even though like Siddhanta Prabhu made this wonderful Prabhupada Memories videos series, you know, that's here to stay. It's a fact that there's many Prabhupada said, right, that sort of floated around in the 1980s and 90s
Yeah.
that Prabhupada disciples used to kind of quote, and it was just common knowledge, you know, but it wasn't really like written down and etched down for posterity. And one of them, for example, was this, you know, Prabhupada said that we should waddle away like a duck. I mean, I've never heard that, you know, in the Prabhupada series, unfortunately. But yeah, so how I'm thinking of that because Krishna here, you know, in the context of Ashtanga Yoga, and I is saying that, you know, there's no possibility of one's becoming a yogi if you eat too much, right? And yet, Prabhupada says you got to eat so much prasadam that you walk off waddling like a duck. So it's one of those sort of adjustments we have to, and that's why I was trying to, you know, a few of the questions for today had to deal with this adjustment between, you know, between the statements of Krishna in the context of Ashtanga Yoga and in the context of the Sankirtan movement in general, and specifically, you know, the crazy 1960s and the wonderful crazy people that Prabhupada had to deal with, you know. Okay, go ahead, Golokananda.
17. He who is he who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system.
Now, what is recreation? What did Prabhupada say about recreation?
Recreation.
Yeah, Krishna says, you know, he mentions about being temperate in recreation, but okay, that means there must be recreation. Temperate, granted, but recreation nonetheless. I heard Prabhupada said kirtan is recreation. And
I think ISKCON has a lot of things to have as a part of recreation, which other generally
We
don't
always
have. It's
have
not very passive and over here. It's very much ecstatic, singing, dancing, and all those things keep one's engaged.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
ISKCON, we
Yes.
always have some kind of festival, some utsav going on. So we always having good recreation.
Right.
Yeah.
Walks. I think there's a, now that I think about it, and I know this because I had read it or heard it, and I immediately mentioned it to Brigupati Prabhu, who's a big fan of walks, you know, of taking walks. And I'm like 99% sure you can quote me that either Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur or Baladev Vidyabhushan or one of our acharyas mentions as an example of recreation is just taking a walk, you know, taking a walk. So I miss Tulum so much, you know, because on planet Earth, there's no greater place to take a morning japa walk than on this Tulum beach, where you're on this white, super soft, non-granular white sand, and you have the, you know, the ocean and the sun rising, and it's really wide and very flat, and you can just walk in perfect weather as the sun is rising, and the beach is clean because there's people cleaning it. I wonder what it must be like to walk on the bank of the Yamuna in the spiritual world.
I'm wondering, devotees also take recreation. Sometimes they go to the beach, they chant, and after they swim.
Right, swimming. Swimming is a Vaishnava sports, right? We also heard like wrestling and swimming.
Yep.
So I guess you can watch UFC. You know what is UFC, Golokananda Priya?
Maybe just
UFC, you don't know? 50% of your life is spoiled. No, it's UFC is the ultimate fighting championship. It's mixed martial arts. You know these guys in an octagon, and there's only and no gloves, and they just fight, right? Until they either knock each other out or the referee pushes them, you know, pushes the guy who's beating on the other out before he kills him.
boxing, yeah.
Yeah, but it's boxing, like, you know,
Boxing
mixed
without
martial
gloves.
arts, like no gloves, kicking allowed, strangling, everything, right? The most fierce type of So I know devotees get into that also. They like to watch. I say that because last Sunday I was in New York with Dario Prabhu, and he's my friend from Croatia, and we were traveling across the states on a sort of a holiday / business trip. And he's huge. I mean, this guy is just like, his muscles are, and he likes, he used to wrestle or whatever. So on Sunday night we had to sit through all these this UFC championship. But I guess that was Krishna conscious.
I think in Alachua, the youth they engage in other activities like
Yeah, like smoking
basketball,
marijuana and have illicit sex. Yeah.
soccer also, they have like some sportive activities. They do a lot
Huh?
of soccer.
Yeah, the good ones. I mean, the ones who are not too much in Maya. There's a lot of illicit recreation activities also going on among the youth, but obviously we don't recommend that. What is it? What's the joke?
I think even...
Huh? Go ahead, Vignesh.
Yes, Prabhu. Now I was just recollecting one incident. Like there is one past time, like when Prabhupada was on a flight to London for attending a Rath Yatra festival.
Indradyumna Swami tells the story, right?
Yeah. So that he was watching a very Charlie Chaplin film, and he was having fun. Yeah.
And then Indradyumna Swami was like, "Oh my God, I'm not watching," and then he heard Prabhupada laughing. He's like, "What is this?" Yeah. So he asked his secretary, like, "Can you ask Prabhupada, like, wow, what is this?" And Prabhupada said, "What did Prabhupada say about Charlie Chaplin?"
He was just watching the film and just chuckling. So,
but he mentioned something about...
Swami was...
Yeah, I know he mentioned.
Then he Prabhupada mentioned something about Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, I'll just tell you. I gave the notes of it. Yeah. Prabhupada said that Krishna is the original source of everything, and since Charlie Chaplin's humor was original,
that's it.
We could appreciate Krishna there. Exactly,
like that the films are Charlie Chaplin's original. So if we find, I guess, original movies, we can watch them. Sometimes I watch, professional sports. Like I'm definitely going to watch the Super Bowl. As a matter of fact, I'm planning to watch it. Super Bowl is American football, Vignesh.
Very big,
and it's a once a year. It's a huge, all of America stops, and everyone's glued to the screen to watch the Super Bowl. And but I know it's not the highest standard. But at least when I watch sports, I try to repeat, "I am the ability in man. I am the ability in man. I am the ability in man. I am the," because Krishna says, "I am the." So when you see a wonderful touchdown or a great, a score being scored, basket being scored, somehow if we can remember, oh, that ability, that great ability, that's Krishna. But better not. I mean, better not. Better stick to just ecstatic dancing and chanting, right?
When this Super Bowl, when you go for Sunday feast, especially today's Sunday, you
empty.
See the temple empty.
I think like Prabhupada used to see everything, Krishna everywhere. I don't know how much we would be able to appreciate.
Exactly.
This is a challenge.
Yeah. Anyway, at least it's innocent. It's not, it's not like breaking the regulative principles, but definitely.
There's some sannyasis, they watch certain movie like, the Avatar or,
Yeah. Rita and Anamarj, he told me once, he says, I get all that I need in terms of romantic rasa, material, mundane romantic rasa, by reading Jane Austen novels. Like Pride and Prejudice, all these classics. I don't really care that much for Jane Austen, and Rita Anamarj told me that, when I'll accumulate enough pious credits, I'll appreciate her novels. But this is just an example. Yeah, and there's Chandramukha Swami and oh, that reminds me. Do you know that Ritadvaja Maharaj?
Yeah.
You probably don't know him, Vignesh. Ritadvaja Swami, does that ring a bell?
He's the one who has some problem with his leg. So.
Does he?
Yeah. Ritadvaja. No. He's different. Yeah.
Here, I'll show you a picture of Ritadvaja
Maharaj. I know who is he. He's based in Florida, isn't it?
He lives in Florida. Vignesh probably doesn't know him because he's a Prabhupada disciple that's not well known at all internationally. But that's him. You see standing next to Hridayananda Maharaj, Another picture of Ritadva just found me. Anyway, that's a good picture of him. So he's, I think he has a few disciples. He's very popular among the youth because when he was younger, he would take young teenagers from Alatra mostly and take them on summer trips around the world. And so for a couple of years, for example, he took, or one at least, he took his Gurukul boys to the Polish tour of Indradyumna Maharaj. And, he engaged them in playing sports and so on and so on. There's a story of, Danavir Maharaj, Golokananda Priya. Do you know Vignesh Prabhu, Danavir Maharaj?
I heard of him. I think there is some websites I've heard in the lectures or something.
He's very strict, and very sort of very old school, very strict, brahmachari.
Brahmachari in his ashram.
He has a brahmachari ashram or he had one in Kansas City, and he's known to be, very, very, very strict and very traditional. So one time, this is a historical fact, he approached Ritadvaja Maharaj, and he said, Ritadvaja Maharaj, he said, yeah, Maharaj? And he said, I have to, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about your boys and sports. Because he wanted to complain that his boys are playing sports. And there are some quotes where Prabhupada says, for example, that playing sports is frivolous sports is included in the gambling section. I've never figured that one out, but there's a few letters where Prabhupada talks about the four regulative principles, and when he mentions gambling, he includes engaging in frivolous sports, not betting on who's going to win the Super Bowl, for example, but actually engaging in sports. He calls that gambling, interestingly enough. So he said, Maharaj, I'm concerned. I'm very concerned about your boys and sports. And Ritadvaja Maharaj said to Danavir Maharaj, he said, Maharaj, do not worry. I want to assure you that my boys, they take their sports very seriously. That was a classic comeback. And now that this is off the subject, but this is such a great comeback line. I mean, one of the greatest comeback lines I've ever heard. And this was by Ravindra Swarup Prabhu. Have you heard of him, Vignesh?
Yeah, he's
Yes.
So, he's a very old-time
scholar.
Grihasta and scholar, and he was, one of the, only, now there's more and more Grihasta gurus, but, back in the 70s, it was a very strong push, for sannyas, and everyone else except sannyasis are fallen. And, that's why they were pushing people like Bhagavan Prabhu, who was a very good manager, as a Grihasta, to take sannyas and then, take sannyas artificially, prematurely, and then they would fall down. And so one time, Ravindra Swarup Prabhu came into the GBC meeting in Mayapur, and as he walked in, some sannyasis, half joking, or probably 3/4 joking, but 1/4 meaning it, said, hey, Ravindra, when are you going to take sannyas? And Ravindra Swarup Prabhu said, and this was confirmed by Shraddha Devi, his secretary, who told me a couple of months ago, confirming this, because I thought the comeback was so cool. He said, nah, no thanks. I'd rather remain renounced. What a comeback line. No thanks. I'd rather stay renounced. Telling sannyasis that as a grihasta, I'd rather stay renounced. It's such a cool line. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Text 18, whose turn is it?
Yours.
Mine.
It's your turn.
So text 18, when the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to have attained yoga. So what can we say here briefly about, because it's also nice to talk about the verses when they come up, because we may not have time later on when something kind of startling or very prominent or very clear kind of appears in our consciousness. We feel free to mention, to say, but like, how does this verse, especially the thing about being devoid of material desires, how does that relate to the whole hatha yoga trend, in the world today?
I think it's
Anyone?
exactly opposite, what I
That's
understand,
funny.
because there is no like proper comparison, because people nowadays do some kind of exercise. Like yoga has been equated with the exercise, nothing more than that. So normally people talk about pranayama and all, but then the very first steps like yama and niyama, people don't follow. So that is a major aspect of if you want to become a devotee of material desire, then we have to do all this no actions like controlling a mind and all. And with people directly jump to pranayama and all those stuffs just to maintain a good health. So it is a kind of desire, a material desire to maintain a good health, or just for your benefit, something like that.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's not so much, wanting the end goal is not just health. The end goal is health in order to enjoy better,
Yeah.
right? Being more healthy in order to enjoy better, being more physically fit and sexy in order to be a stronger desire of lust from men. For example, it's clear many women do yoga for that, or many men probably go to yoga classes so they know they'll be surrounded by 80% women. Yeah, there's really very little talk about motivation. What are you doing yoga for? Like, what's this yoga practice for? And at best you get some sort of Advaita Vedanta, right, idea of merging into Brahman and stuff. But here Krishna really makes it clear that you want to attain yoga. Well, attaining yoga means being completely free of material desires and you wanting nothing for sense enjoyment, and on the positive side, of course, wanting everything for Krishna's satisfaction. That's why there's some statistics that show that actually most people today who practice hatha yoga in the West are not interested in the spiritual dimension of it. Like the large majority of people who do hatha yoga are in it for what we would say sort of the material side of it. We're not criticizing, but that's just a sad fact.
And
At this,
devotees, they try to go to yoga
yeah,
club or so that just
and it is a good link. At the same time, we have to be honest and see that there is a. It's interesting because on the one side they're kind of like completely uninterested. In another sense, that yoga scene is sort of our closest customers to bhakti. For example, like were you thinking of like Devamrita Maharaj's loft programs, for example?
yeah.
Yeah.
I know many other devotees also. Even in Los Angeles, they have like a yoga. Have you heard that? When I was there, they have one building there. There's a
Yeah,
the
right up from
if you go to
Watsika,
yoga, yeah,
Veda Yoga, it's called. But a
yeah.
lot of people who do yoga, they don't really care to become devotees.
Some became devotee. I
Some
know
become
one
devotees.
girl, Ananda.
Yeah,
She
a lot
was
of
a
We
girls,
should have a very
a
balanced
lot of girls.
program.
Huh?
You should have a very balanced program. Like if ISKCON takes it up like on a very balanced scale, maybe then there could be a knowledge at the same time. There could be a good benefit at a physical level as well. It could be a combination rather than just divesting it from the spiritual aspect. We can offer something that would be great thing.
There's also a demographic element, Golokananda Priya. Like, it's a fact that 80%, 90. Like, for example, when we do kirtan in Paris at the Jivamukti Yoga Studio in the 10th arrondissement, in the 10th district, every time, like, there'll be 50 people and it'll be 45 women and maybe 2 gay gentlemen or 3 gay gentlemen and 2 straight men. And 40, yeah, and 45 women. And okay, they're all souls and great, Haribol, but obviously we want a balanced membership, to join ISKCON. And it's also a sociological fact. This is not, being sexist or anything, or male chauvinistic, but it's just a sociological fact that generally speaking, there's a larger number of men or souls in men's body who feel a calling to take up managerial pastoral responsibility in religious institutions, like to become, let's say, for in our language, to become temple presidents, for example, or to become preachers or managers. It's just there's a higher number of men who do that than women. Just like there's more women who tend to be nurses than men. It's not bad or good. It's just according to one's nature. And being a manager doesn't mean you're a pure devotee in any way. It's just sort of a function that one takes on. So even though Prabhupada said, like, what did you know? Quoting Bhaktisiddhanta, what did Bhaktisiddhanta say about religious institutions? What did he say about them? This is a great. You guys should know this. This is a super powerful statement. What did Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur say about religious institutions? They are what?
No, mostly widows and I don't know.
They're what?
And maybe I'm out of. I'm thinking one something on my mind that is in most of the religious is mostly widows and women.
Yeah.
Come to.
I'm thinking of another quote where he said that religious institutions are necessary evils. Necessary. So they're evils. I mean, Bhaktivinoda Thakur also said, right, that institutionalism or sectarianism is the greatest enemy of humans. At the same time, they're necessary. You need an ISKCON, you need a Gaudiya Math, you need a structure with managers to kind of run the show. It's a necessary evil. So why am I saying that? Because coming back to this point of people joining the Sankirtan movement, aside from our own children, we want obviously to have our own children become devotees and grow from having children, and not just from people converting like most of us did, from a non-Vaishnava upbringing to a Vaishnava lifestyle, which is great. But most religions grow very much by procreation within the group. The group grows from inside, right? So aside from kids being born in our movement and taking up positions, I don't know if the yoga scene is the ideal niche. You know the word niche, Vignesh? Niche.
Yeah.
You know what that means actually? It's a French word.
Like a special place, right? Some special unique thing
Yeah.
that is there of the particular thing.
It's a French word that actually means like a niche is, for example, where your dog sleeps. It's literally like let's see, abri où couche un chien. It's basically where a dog sleeps. And of course in English it's basically a specialized segment of the market, right? Or for a particular kind of product or service. So the yoga niche, I don't think is the ideal place for us to find at least male members who are not just into let's go for a kirtan and then go smoke our joints and go drink our wine at the at the vegan restaurant after. It's like who do kirtan as entertainment. That's glorious, and we anyone who approaches Krishna in any way is glorious. Right? Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaraditi vrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Whether you're full of material desires or free of material desires, if you approach Krishna, that's great. At the end of the day, though, we should all be thinking, especially as time is going and ticking and we're getting closer to leaving our bodies, we want to be the instruments in bringing people to Krishna, not just as sort of like enjoying, once a month participants, but as actual dedicated, not just also just practitioners, which is great, but actually also spiritual leaders who want to become spiritual leaders in some capacity or other. And I don't know if the yoga scene is the best, but to be discussed.
I'm just wondering why it's not happening like in India. I know it's growing, in Russia and all is growing, but here in Europe and in America, it's very
I was
difficult
just
now. So hardly.
Well, I was just at Brooklyn, like last week, and I spoke to the temple president. I forget his name. A wonderful grihasta who was in Mayapur for some years. He used to be an FBI or CIA or FBI agent, really together, devotee, Hamsa. I think it's Hamsa Rupa, maybe. He was the first. He was actually.
Rupa.
You know him? That's him, right? Hansa Rupa.
He looked a little bit like Asian looking.
Yeah, exactly. He looks a little bit Asian, a little bit Japanese, right? Yeah, so that's him. So so he told us, we went there with Dario. Hey, there's some static background noise. I don't know whose mic, but it's doing some. So maybe it's me. I don't think so because I have a good mic here. Anyway, so he told us that there's a lot of young people joining ISKCON, joining the Brooklyn Temple now. In this crazy situation we're in. But yeah, you're right. Now, even in Russia, though, to be fair, it's slowed down a lot. It slowed down a lot. There was a big burst after the communism fell, and it was sort of a free for all virgin territory for religious groups to come and give water to a population that was extremely thirsty for decades because of being subjected to thirst by the communist demoniac leaders. But it got to a point where there's a lot of different sense gratificatory options, and when you have a lot of sense gratificatory options, what is that verse? Samadho navidiyate. What's that verse, Vignesh, that ends Samadho navidiyate? Bahushaka Yanantascha Samadho navidiyate. Like when there's, when you're bewildered and distracted by sense gratification, when your mind is bahushaka, right? Multi-branched, then the resolute determination for devotional service does not take place. So different times, like I remember I was in a church, in a Catholic, I'll always remember this. I was about 5-6 years ago, we were with Rida Nenamarj in France, and we were either in France or Italy, and we went to visit some church, some small little, maybe it was Notre Dame in Paris, or it was a smaller, quaint little church somewhere, I forget. But we were sitting there was like maybe 3-4 people in the church walking. There was no service going on. We were sitting on the wooden pews, and he reflected, he's a great historian. He's a really great historian. And he reflected that, maybe right now we're going through a period in time, in terms of we, meaning, Gaudiya Vaishnavism on planet Earth in the West, where for some reason or other, he said in the past, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, there were waves when they were very prominent in society, and then other times where they were, not so prominent in society. And so maybe, after Prabhupada is a phase where, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas for some years or decades are kind of like not very prominent, not very influential, as much as, the few that are there are trying their best and, really praying and being as sincere as the Vaishnavas of other more prominent periods. Maybe it's just the time we're in, under Krishna's arrangement, where, it's a great lesson for us in detachment, karma niyabadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Like, we have to just try our best and be satisfied with whatever results Krishna gives us. And of course we'd want, people knocking at our doors and, yeah, how can I become a devotee? And I remember, I remember this because I was in Salt Lake City last week, a couple of weeks ago also. And I'll always remember this. I was on traveling Sankirtan in Salt Lake City with my friend Tara Prabhu, with whom I used to do traveling Sankirtan. He's from America. Now he lives in Mayapur in Poland with his Polish wife and kid. And so we stopped in Salt Lake City because we were following a rock and roll band called, what is it called? I forget. But all the kids who went to these bands were like 13, 14-year-old and had red or pink hair. The Cranberries. That was the band's name. Have you heard of the Cranberries, Vignesh? We'll take some points away from your Bhakti Shastri exam on that one. So we went to see. So we would follow the Cranberries because the kids who went to see the Cranberries were super, super favorable. And in Utah, they're even more favorable. I mean, kids in Utah are, because most of them are Mormons, and Mormons are just really pious people. And they're really nice, genuine, monotheistic, moral, wonderful people. And so I always remember we went to this show and we were outside before the concert came, and Tara and I, we both held a box of like 90 Sri Upanishads, soft covers. And we said, hey guys, we got some ancient books, of wisdom from the Himalayas, whatever was our line. And we took out a couple of, with our hand, holding the box in our left hand. And we were showing the book, the small white, and I'd never had this happen in 5 or 6 years of book distribution. All of a sudden there was a swarm of 20 teenagers who were literally pushing each other and reaching out. I want one. Here's it, and giving us like $2 or $1, because that's what we were asking for, $1 or $2 for them. And they were like literally fighting to get, and we didn't have enough time, to take out books from our box and, and take $1 and put it in our pocket and take the next book and give it to them. And I mean, that, compared to, for example, book distribution in the airport, where, oh my God, if you were lucky to stop one person out of 100, and out of, 100 people you stopped, maybe someone would give you 5 seconds. And out of those who gave you 5 seconds, maybe one would listen to you tell the whole mantra. And out of those, maybe 100 of those, maybe one would buy the Bhagavad Gita from you. That's kind of how it is now, Golokananda Priya. Like, but at other times in history, it's like those kids in Salt Lake City who are just, fighting to join ISKCON. What can we do? We just have to be detached and continue to be strict in our sadhana and just depend on Krishna for the results. And why? There's sociological factors, there's historical factors, there's internal ISKCON factors. We've gone through some pretty shitty, excuse me to say, but we've gone some pretty bad public reputation issues. We've had gurus who fell down. We've had, child abuse cases. We've had, it's like even Prabhupada says, after a great acharya passes away, the period after the acharya passes away is a time of confusion, And so maybe that time of confusion was not just, the 1980s and 1990s and early 2000. Maybe it takes a couple 100 years for things to kind of regulate themselves after the passing away of the Senapati Bhakta of Lord Chaitanya. Who knows, What do you think?
It makes sense, It makes sense because like you said, like you're a good point, we just have to do whatever we need to do and just raise the result to Krishna.
Being intelligent about principles is really, really, really important, but being also into intelligence about details is very important. Here's the issue of Yukta Vairagya, and where like Giriraj Maharaj likes to quote Prabhupada at the end, like he called him in the middle of the night in Vrindavan in like October or something. In the middle of the night, he called him and he told Giriraj Maharaj, according to him, like he asked him in the middle of the night, how will this movement continue? Remember? Did you ever hear that story, that anecdote that Giriraj Maharaj tells? He says, he asked him, like, how will this movement continue? And Giriraj Maharaj said that he gave sort of the company line answer. Well, Prabhupada, as long as we remain strict followers of the four regulative principles and, and chant our rounds nicely. And then Prabhupada said, yes, but he said there must be intelligence and organization. So, yeah, I keep thinking of to answer this question. You've heard of, remember I often quote, or I use the example of, what's his name? Oh my God, I can't believe I'm spacing out his name. The famous Christian pastor, America's pastor.
Billy Graham? No.
Yeah, Billy Graham. I often quoted him, right? Billy Graham, who was just really, if we want to talk about Christian empowerment, he was empowered like crazy to convert thousands of people to Christianity in this modern era. And in his youth, when he was a preacher and he would go on these, campaigns and what did you call them? When the Spanish would go on, they would go and conquer lands and kill people, unfortunately. What were they called? The crusades. So they would use this term, to go on crusades. And he coined this wonderful term to be anchored to the rock and geared to the times. So anchored to the rock, like when you have a boat and you have the anchor, it locks into that rock, and in that way the boat does not move at all. It's just anchored. And what's the rock? Our rock, is our four regulative principles, our chanting 16 rounds, our Siddhanta, Prabhupada's books, etc. That we don't touch, but geared to the times. When you have a car that has shift, gears instead of automatic, you're geared to the times. If the hill is really high, then you put yourself in second so that you have more torque. If you're going down, you put yourself in fifth. So depending on the terrain that you're driving in, you put yourself in a corresponding gear. So being geared to the time is this whole notion of yukta vairagya. Anasyaktasya vishayanya tarhamupayunjata nirbandho Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagya muchate. And therefore you have initiatives like Hridayananda Maharaj's Krishna West, like Devamrita Maharaj's Loft programs, like the Bhakti Center, where where devotees are trying to remain loyal to the Siddhanta and the practice, but at the same time be modern, be cool, be relevant, use modern technology and trends, and so that to be relevant. So in some way, I agree with those who analyze that. Okay, yes, the times are difficult, fine, but we also sort of, in a way, in ISKCON have sort of become disconnected from being relevant. And one of the way, which I believe in, and I don't want to talk about it, but as you know, is the dress code issue for male men, for grihasta men, and how I think that's a huge problem in terms of giving a nonverbal impression to non-devotees that if you want to practice bhakti yoga, you have to start having a shika and a shaved head and a white kurta and a white dhoti, and that's what pleases God the most, and you can't just remain dress how you usually dress. And so anyway, you've heard me speak about that a million times, but yeah, there's times that we can't control and there's things that we can control, and the things we can control, we really have to be smart and intelligent, like Prabhupada said about that. Whose turn is it? Let's read one more verse, and then let's finish to 29, and then we take a quick break.
Yeah, I'll just read verse number 19. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self.
Verse 20 to 23. The stage of perfection is called trance or samadhi, when one's mind is completely restrained from the material mental activities by practice of yoga. This is characterized by one's abilities to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses.
That was your favorite sentence, right?
Yeah.
And that was also Vignesh. I think everyone likes that one the most. It shows, we all want to be happy, isn't it?
Happiness, yeah. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulty.
You hear this, Lawrence? This is the definition of samadhi, that when you're situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulty, like having COVID. So even if you have COVID, because Lawrence Prabhu just recovered from COVID, and he was telling me, don't mind, he was telling me that, when I was down with COVID, I didn't even chant. Like I was just like, the last thing on my mind is to chant because you're so weak and stuff. But according to the Bhagavad Gita, you're never shaken from your head being at Krishna's lotus feet. Of course, Lawrence is already Krishna conscious, so a few days in, if he's really sick, like he doesn't have to necessarily chant to have his mind on Krishna's lotus feet. But the point is, even amidst the greatest difficulty, you're never shaken. You don't give up Krishna consciousness. Like for example, between us, I don't know what happened to Sorel and Jacob. Anyway, we're recording, so I don't want to record. Well, let me pause this for a second here.
Okay, this is another sentence. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact.
Jai. So we've got a few more, 24, and then we'll take a break. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with undeviated determination and faith. One should abandon without exception, all material desires born of false ego. See, again, there's this idea of really, that's why it's important for us to pray like Lord Chaitanya, you know? Nadanam najanam na sundarim kavitam va jagatishakamaya mama janmani janmanishwari bhavatad bhaktira hetu kitwe. And I hate to use myself as an example, but you know, when it's the day of an appearance or disappearance of one of our acharyas, like a few days ago, whose was it? It was Gopal Bhatt Goswami, or, you know, I think it was Ramachandra Kaviraj some days back. It was, you know, Jayadev Goswami. So on those days, because I know I have a lot of material desires, so I pray to them, please, like, free me, you know, bless me so that I can serve Krishna without material desires. You know, we should pray to Krishna to free us from material desires. Nishinga, there's this beautiful prayer in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Oh my Lord, please remove from our heart, you know, material desires, so that we can be fearless in the struggle for existence in the material world. You know. It's a small anecdote. It's not an accident that on Govardhan Parikrama, towards the end, the tip of Govardhan, there's a Nishingadev temple there. It's abandoned. There's no active puja there, but there's a temple of Nishingadev, and it's very telling that, you know, why would there be a temple of Nishingadev at Govardhan Hill? And the idea is that, you know, in order for us to enter Vrindavan, our hearts have to be free of material desires, and this is where we, you know, we pray to Nishingadev specifically, who can rip away our material desires from our heart, you know. Nadanam najanam nasundarim kavitam va jagatishakamaya mama janmani janmanishware bhavatad bhakti rahiti tvaye. So we have to be introspective, you know. Okay, Vignesh ji. Text 25. Are you there?
Are you mute?
Vignesh.
No.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm there. Text 25. Gradually, step by step, with full conviction, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence. And thus, the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else.
Think of nothing else.
Yeah. From whatever and wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one may certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self.
So let me ask you, this is one of the questions I should have asked for the questions. Like, how does this verse relate to japa, to our practice of daily japa?
That what I heard is that Prabhupada said, if your mind wanders, you should bring back your mind to the sound of the holy name by chanting loudly, you know, just hearing the name.
Exactly. Well, I was thinking of that exactly. Were you thinking of that too, Vignesh?
Yeah, like loud chanting, I think often helps, and avoid the distraction rather than doing a japa. So at times when we're distracted, better to loudly chant, raising your hands maybe, and you can, I think, come take the back.
There's a book that came out some years back, a compilation of Prabhupada's statements about chanting. It's called On Chanting, not On Chanting. It's, what is it called? Anyway, it's a BBT sort of compilation, and there's one conversation in there. I forgot what year, whatever, but where Prabhupada is asked in a conversation by a disciple, like, Prabhupada, you know, I can't think of Krishna while I'm chanting, and Prabhupada said, thinking? Just hear. You know, what is this thinking? Just hear the sound, right? So when our mind, you know, we first of all get those goddamn, get those goddamn cell phones away from you when you're chanting japa, because it's just a question of a few seconds before you are on that thing watching your messages on Instagram and Telegram and Facebook and blah blah blah, and you're having interrupted japa. And ideally stay away from your computer as well, you know. And just like yesterday, I was in DeLand, Florida, you know, Bhakti Charumarja's cow sanctuary that he set up before he passed away. And so I went on a japa walk in the property, and I didn't have my phone. And for a half hour, not short, but half hour, I walked, and I didn't have my phone, and it was just in nature. The moon was kind of out almost because it's starting now, and I chanted good rounds because there was no, so get your distractions out, and then when you start thinking about what you have to do for the day and the money problems you have and the marriage issues you have and the career choices you have and whatever is preoccupying us, you got to like somehow, like you both said, like chant louder or somehow bring your mind back to the sound of the Maha Mantra, back to the sound of that Maha Mantra. Okay, finally, whose turn is it?
Yours.
It's your turn.
You see how humble I am? I'm just showing the example of like, no, I'm kidding. Text 29, the yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest happiness. Wow. By virtue of his identity with Brahman, he is liberated. His mind is peaceful. His passions are quieted, and he is freed from sin. So yeah, Krishna really like tells us all the time, like you want to be happy, then be conscious of me. Like you really want happiness, be conscious of me. Like there's no way around it, but we're like, no. I still find happiness in sex. I'll still find happiness in drugs. I'll still find happiness in name and fame. I'll still find happiness in, and everything but Krishna. Okay, last two
I like
verses.
the sorry,
Huh?
Yeah.
sin,
What?
I think we have been sinful for so many lifetimes. We're free from sin. I like this because we've been sinful for so many lifetimes,
Mm,
It's a lot of purification we have to do in order to be free from
yeah.
sin.
But living a life when we're following the four regulative principles, that's basically a sinless life, If we can manage to do that, of course, with the help of the positive, higher taste we get from Krishna consciousness, but if we can live a life free of the four pillars of sin, that's basically a sinless life, Wouldn't it be
And
nice,
it
like
also
once we,
destroys the past sins.
the Krishna
Studying the
consciousness.
self, being free from all material contamination, the yogi achieves the highest perfection of state of happiness in touch with the supreme consciousness. I think it was Vignesh's turn. Sorry, it's Vignesh. You can do 29.
Yeah. Verse number 29. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized man sees me everywhere.
That's kind of what you were talking about, like, Charlie Chaplin, right? you see Krishna in there because you're so deep in Krishna consciousness. What's that verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita? Stabor jangam deke na deke tar murti. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, Sarvatra Nija Ishtadeva Spurti.
Exactly. Stabor jangam deke.
Dekhe Tara Murti.
It's na deke. Stabor jangam na deke or deke?
Na Dekhe Tara Murti. I think Dekhe Tara Murti.
Dekhe Tara Murti.
You know that verse too? Stabhar.
It's Madhya Leela, chapter 8.
I can't find it.
274.
Stabhar. What is it?
Stavara Jangama Dekhe, Na Dekhe Tara Murti.
Can you give the
Sarvatra
reference?
Haya Nija.
Nija
Yeah,
Ishtadev
Madhya
Smriti.
Leela, yeah, 8.274.
8?
8.274.
274. This was one of the favorite verses of Bhakti Charumarj. I'm impressed that you know it, Vignesh. Do you see it? Here, let me share the screen. Go look, Ananda.
274. I have it. Okay.
Stavar jangam deke, na deke tar murti, soratra hoy nija ishtadev spurti. God, when I think of this verse, I think of my guru so much, because he knew, he was Bengali, so he knew these, this verse is not so well known. Of course, we've got great scholars like Vignesh Adhikari, so who knows it? But aside from that, not many devotees.
This is my favorite verse, so I actually know this verse. I normally also like to quote this verse whenever possible.
Huh? The Mahabhagavad. Huh?
Who quotes this verse? You say, Vignesh?
Bhakti Charumarj.
No, I also like to quote this verse often, so I like this. This is my favorite verse.
The Mahabhagavad, the advanced devotee, certainly sees everything mobile and immobile, right? You have Stavar and Jangam. But he does not see exactly their forms. Rather, everywhere he immediately sees manifest the form of the Supreme Lord. What's the example that Prabhupada gives, where that's given? Like if you have well, speaking of the mother, and the mother sees the shoes of the child, so she doesn't see the shoes, she sees the child, even though it's just the shoes, right? So
Yes.
similarly, you see a tree and you're reminded of Krishna. So, but that's not artificial. That comes from deep Krishna consciousness, and that's why it says the Mahabhagavat, right? Although it's interesting that in the translation there is no mention of Mahabhagavat. Prabhupada added that, but Stavar Jangam.
Advanced devotee.
But where is advanced devotee? But where is advanced devotee in the actual Bengali?
I think it's the context of the previous verses of this chapter.
You like to contextualize, Vignesh, don't you? Okay. He does that always in his answers very nicely. Okay, so let's take a 5 minutes because we only have like 40 minutes left. So let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll get back. All right. I'll pause and remind me to record again. Resume the recording. So let's go to our questions real quick. Again, you all answered quite well. How is the mind the friend and the enemy also? You wanted to add anything to that? How does that again relate to japa and to not chanting japa? Because remember, like we took a vow to chant rounds. We didn't even take a vow to do Harinam Sankirtan, interestingly enough. I mean, Harinam Sankirtan is the Yuga Dharma, granted, but interestingly enough, Prabhupada didn't ask us to take a vow to do, X number of hours of Harinam Sankirtan. Interestingly enough, the only vow that we take when we take initiation is to chant, japa. So how does this verse about the mind being the best friend or the worst enemy relate to this idea of japa? Or how does japa relate to this verse?
I think when we don't finish our prescribed number of rounds, our mind is our best enemy, because we're listening to our mind. Our mind says, okay, don't chant, do something else. This is the time, our mind is not our best friend. It's considered our enemy.
Good point. Anything you want to add, Vignesh?
Things are like we have already a powerful source of knowledge when it comes to the glories of the chanting of the holy names. So whenever we feel distracted or mind may wander here and there, maybe we should use our intelligence rather than to control our mind. Like normally what happens is that our mind goes somewhere and we just go along with that particular flow. Maybe if we can use our intelligence and just remind ourselves of the glories of the holy name, and in that way use our intelligence to control the mind back,
right?
That would also help. Some kind of foundational knowledge that we already have as per the Gaudiya Vaishnava Parampara.
When we use our mind to serve Krishna, then it's our best friend, right? Because the mind is connected to the senses. So when we push our senses via the mind to serve Krishna, like Bhaktisiddhanta said, what did he say we should do in the morning and evening?
Beat our mind 1,000 times with the shoes.
Right.
And a broom.
A broom and with shoes.
I think our Acharyas have quoted a lot, sung a lot of poems on the mind, right?
Right.
They are talking with their mind. That is the whole song.
Like which one?
Like
Bhajahure Mana?
Mana Mandire, Bhajahure Mana, a lot of songs like that.
Right. And its worst enemy when what? When we let our mind, take our senses to sense gratification. Right? Simple as that. Yeah. So, talking about having the super soul being already reached. The second question. What does that mean? What did you say, Vignesh, about the super soul being reached?
Yeah, basically, I just when read the purport of the Prabhupada, then there is a word like Paramatma Samahita. The Sanskrit word which is used over there is Paramatma Samahita. So I was just trying to understand, because just from the explanation on the purport itself, I was not able to connect how exactly no one can attain the state. One can attain the super soul just by practicing the yoga,
Mind
or just
control.
by practicing this mind control. So I thought maybe it's my understanding that like normally what happens is that mind control is just one aspect of the yoga, but ultimate mind control is when we accept to take a control, be under the control of Krishna, on the internal potency of the Lord.
Exactly.
So if
Exactly.
we are under influence of the external potency of the Lord, then even if we claim to have mind control, like impersonalists may have that concept, I'm doing a yoga and have a lot of mind control. But then ultimately we are still taking a shelter of external energy of Lord. That is not a true mind control in that sense. So when we truly have a mind control, then we take a shelter of Krishna, and then there is no
Naturally.
difference in the will. Yeah, it's a natural
So
thing.
what here can we say about the verse Jivera Swaruphoy Krishnera Nityadas? What does this verse sort of tell us indirectly about Jivera Swaruphoy Krishnera Nityadas? Or what does the Jivera Swaruphoy Krishnera Nityadas verse tell us about this verse? If I may,
Is that
go ahead, Golokananda Priya.
Jivarak sort of that our constitutional position is just by eternal servant of Krishna?
Exactly. So it just goes to show that this verse that we're seeing here in the Gita tends to prove that, look, when you conquer your mind, your conditioned mind, your material mind, which just puts material obstacles to your self-realization, when that is conquered, what's left is a smooth, natural relationship with the super soul or with Krishna, because by nature our what's it called, our default settings, the default setting of the jiva is to be in union with the super soul, in union in the sense of service and relationship and rasa. So when the mind is conquered, what's left is our natural, like you say, our natural constitution of serving Krishna. Yeah. Okay. Pebbles, stones, or gold? Which one would you prefer, though, Golokananda Priya? If I gave you 1 pound of pebbles, 1 pound of stones, or 1 pound of gold?
My material mind, I would accept gold.
What about your spiritual mind?
Materially. If I become advanced, I think, I'll just see everything as same.
But even your
Because
spiritual mind, you would take the gold, right? What did Prabhupada say? Like, if you offer me money, the Vaishnava, like, the Mayavadi
you
says,
can
no,
use
no,
it in
no.
service of Krishna.
Yeah, you take the money and then you put your hand out and you ask for more because you're going to use it in Krishna's service. But I think it's clear what Krishna is trying to say, right? You're not, like, materially, you're not influenced by one or the other. Okay, what do you guys think of my talking about the living in a secluded place and Prahlad Maharaj's 7th canto question, or 7th canto instruction? Okay, let me say,
It's not. It's
I liked how Golokananda Priya said, Lord Chaitanya has ordered us to preach in every town and village, including busy cities, to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Prabhupada established temples in so many big cities like London, Bury Place, Los Angeles, New York, Canada, Toronto, all big busy part of the city. Yes.
yeah.
What are you going to say, Viknesh?
Now I was just saying that when Krishna is speaking this verse in the context of like Ashtanga yoga, so in that sense, he's giving some rules. Now normally devotee is most of the time above the rules. He doesn't care for the rules, and he just try to distribute the love of God, irrespective of whether he would like to be in a situation where he's alone, or he doesn't mind either
What
of the
is that
case.
verse
So
that you kind of allude to here from the Bhagavatam about
it's
Narayana
7 point.
Parayana?
Acha.
The Narayana Parayana verse. Does that ring a
Yeah,
bell?
Kotishvi Apu Mahamune. That was Kotishvi Apu Mahamune,
I
like
don't think
among
so.
thousands.
Narayana Parayana verse. I think it's from the Bhagavatam. That a devotee basically goes to hell or wherever.
Yeah.
Let me see.
No
If it's,
Bibeti, something like that.
is
No
it?
Bibeti. Yeah, like he doesn't fear irrespective of wherever he goes. He's something like on that lines.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Let me. I didn't think about that verse when it was, Narayana Parayana Bhagavatam. It's I think it's verse from the 6th canto. Let's see if this is the right one. Yeah, Muktanam Apisiddhanam. No. Narayana Parayana
The verse
Sudru.
you are referring is 6.1.41.
What is it?
6.1.41.
6:141.
Yeah.
Bhagavatam. Can you read it to us?
Narayana Paraha Sarve na Kutashana Bhibyati.
Yes.
Varga Apavarga Narakeshu Api. Narakeshu Api.
Narakeshu.
Yeah, something on that lines.
But 6:141? No, it's not 6:141.
Yeah, the 6141 is no, it's not this one.
Okay.
Narakeshu. Anyway, Narakeshu. Basically, whether you go to Vaikuntha or Naraka, that's the point, right? So, like you said, that the overriding principle is giving people Krishna, and given that there's a lot more people in big cities, the devotee sacrifices. And what's that verse? Speaking of which, where Prahlad Maharaj again, he says, "I'm not afraid of material existence." Why? Why is he not afraid of material existence? What does he say in the 7th canto? He says, "My dear Lord, I am not at all afraid of material existence because..."
Basically, he says that I do not wish to be liberated alone.
That's another one. That's nice. That's nice. But that's not the one I'm thinking about.
There is one more thing. Yeah, he says that I know that without Krishna consciousness, without taking shelter of your lotus feet,
yeah, but
one
again,
cannot be
that's
happy.
Yeah, but that's not the one I'm looking for.
Is that because Krishna is present everywhere?
He says, "My dear Lord Nrsingadev," this is 7:944. 7:944. He says, "My dear Lord Nrsingadev, I see that there are many saintly persons indeed, but they are interested only in their own deliverance, not caring for the big cities and towns. They go to the Himalayas or the forest to meditate with vows of silence. They are not interested in delivering others. As for me, however, I do not wish to be liberated alone." All right, let me share the screen with you. I do not wish to be liberated alone.
Yeah.
Highlighted. Leaving aside all these poor fools and rascals. I know that without Krishna consciousness, without taking shelter of your lotus feet, one cannot be happy. Therefore, I wish to bring them back to the shelter of your lotus feet. And here, Prabhupada actually quotes this verse that I was referring to, Narayana Para Sarve. He says, let's read the purport. This is a decision of the Vaishnava, the pure devotee of the Lord. By the way, I was listening. It's so interesting. Yesterday, when I went to the land, for me, it was I really felt like my guru was speaking to me, because I went to the land for only 2 nights. And the first night I arrived, I listened to, just for 10 minutes, those Prabhupada Memories videos before going to bed. And I just picked one just randomly on YouTube. And it's a devotee, I forget his name. He said how he wanted to, he told Prabhupada, I think I want to go to Rishikesh and go to an ashram there and be a brahmachari. And Prabhupada said, please don't do that. Please don't do that. And he said this to him. He said, I wasted 12 years in Vrindavan. Wow! I wasted 12 years in Vrindavan, Prabhupada said. And why it hit me home, because I had some land in Mayapur and I sold that land. And so I don't have a place anymore that's mine in, quote unquote, in Mayapur. And sometimes I kind of regret that and feel, oh my God, but then coming back there to get to the land where, where Bhakti Maharaj used to have his base, and hearing Prabhupada saying, of course, those who go, I'm not saying devotees should not live in Vrindavan or go to Vrindavan. I'm not saying that at all. But from a sort of a sense of a preacher, like Prabhupada, I mean, it's amazing. It just struck me so hard that Prabhupada said, I wasted 12 years in Vrindavan, So Prabhupada says here, it's a choice of the Vaishnava. The Krishna conscious person can go even to hell and still be happy. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj says, Naivud Vijay Paraduratya Vaitaranya. O best of the great personalities, I am not at all afraid of material existence. The pure devotee is never unhappy in any condition of life. And here's this famous verse, right? Narayana para sarve nakutas chanana bibhyati sarva pavarga narakeshu apitulyartha darshinaha. Quote, this is translation. Devotees solely engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, never fear any condition of life. For them, the heavenly planets, liberation, and the hellish planets are all the same. Can you mute yourselves, Prabhu? Because someone's making, there's some interference with the microphone. Okay, that's better. So even for them, the heavenly planets, liberation, and the hellish planets are all the same, for such devotees are interested only in the service of the Lord. For a devotee, being situated in the heavenly planets and being in the hellish planets are equal, for a devotee lives neither in heaven nor in hell, but with Krishna in the spiritual world. The secret of success for the devotee is not understood by the karmis and gyanis. Karmis therefore try to be happy by material adjustment, like going to Tulum, for example. And gyanis want to be happy by becoming one with the Supreme. The devotees have no such interest. He is not interested in so-called meditation in the Himalayas or the forest. Rather, here we go, his interest is in the busiest part of the world, where he teaches people Krishna consciousness. The Krishna consciousness movement was started for this purpose. By the way, Harikesh, ex-Swami, recalls that when he was transcribing these purports, these very same purports, and he was in Vrindavan at the time with Prabhupada, he was noticing how Prabhupada was in the mood of Prahlad Maharaj. And so he mentions how one day he told Prabhupada, it seems like you're so much in the mood of Prahlad Maharaj. And Prabhupada, according to him, said, yes, I'm always thinking about these fools and rascals. So let me finish the purport. Are you with us, Golokananda Priya? Because it seems like she went off. Vignesh, can you put your thumbs up? You're hearing and everything, right? Yeah. I don't know what happened to Golokananda Priya. Anyway, let's continue because we don't have time. The Krishna consciousness movement was started for this purpose. We do not teach one to meditate in a secluded place. We do not teach one to meditate in a secluded place just so that one may show that he has become very much advanced and may be proud of his so-called transcendental meditation, although he engages in all sorts of foolish materialistic activities. Have you heard of the story of how Prabhupada had a disciple from America? He was African American, but that doesn't matter. But a disciple from America who came to Mayapur, and he decided to live in a tree. Did you ever hear that story?
No.
It's in the Prabhupada Memories. And this devotee, somehow, he speculated that he wanted to what's it called? He wanted to kind of imitate Haridas Thakur. So he literally moved into a tree, like he lived on a tree branch or some sort of, he made himself, and he was just living there, day after day after day, just chanting all day. And I guess some devotees were impressed by that, but when they told Prabhupada wasn't impressed at all. And sure enough, like a few weeks later, that devotee, came down from his tree and went back to America and was never seen again. A Vaishnava like Prahlad Maharaj is not interested in such a bluff of spiritual advancement. Rather, he is interested in enlightening people in Krishna consciousness because that is the only way for them to become happy. Prahlad Maharaj clearly says, Nanyam tvad asya sharanam brahmato nupashye. Quote, I know that without Krishna consciousness, without taking shelter of your lotus feet, one cannot be happy, unquote. One, do you see it? Do you follow with me?
Yes.
Are you with me? Yeah. One wanders within the universe, life after life. But by the grace of a devotee, a servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one can get the clue to Krishna consciousness and then not only become happy in this world, but also return home back to Godhead. That is the real target in life. The members of the Krishna consciousness movement are not at all interested in so-called meditation in the Himalayas or the forest, where one will only make a show of meditation. Nor are they interested, and listen to this one, nor are they interested in opening many schools for yoga and meditation in the cities. Rather, every member of the Krishna consciousness movement is interested in going door to door. Oh my God, did you ever go door to door with Prabhupada's books?
No.
It's tough, man. It's tough. Especially if you try to sell them the books. I mean, it's hard enough just if, sir, sorry to bother you. We have a gift, a free book gift. It's the Bhagavad Gita. That's already very humbling. But what to speak of if you ask money for it? But Prabhupada says, every member of the Krishna consciousness movement is interested in going door to door. Now it's probably impossible because now there's all these codes and QR codes to get into buildings. So to try to convince people about the teachings of Bhagavad Gita as it is, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. That is the purpose of the Hare Krishna movement. The members of the Krishna consciousness movement must be fully convinced that without Krishna consciousness, one cannot be happy. Thus, welcome back, Golokananda Priya. Maybe you can mute yourself. Thus, the Krishna conscious person avoids all kinds of pseudo-spiritualists, transcendentalists, meditators, monists, philosophers, and philanthropists. So like both of you answered very well, like there's an overriding principle here. And the overriding principle is that the devotee's compassion like overrides the rules and regulations. The devotee's compassion is the ultimate factor. And the devotee is willing to sacrifice his health, his wealth. I mean, his wealth, also his or her, comfort for the sake of reaching as many souls as possible. Yeah, Golokananda Priya, it seems like your microphone is doing some sort of little noise. But that's okay. Okay, number 5. The lamp in the windless place. Very clear. You both answered very well. When you're deeply Krishna conscious, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're like inactive, right?
Yes.
You can be, if you're in a ecstatic kirtan, are you kind of like a lamp in a windless place? Yes or no? What would you say? If you're engaged in the midst of a ecstatic kirtan where you're sweating and dancing and yelling Krishna's name and dancing back and forth, can the analogy of a lamp in a windless place be applied there?
Yes. No,
You would say yes?
I think because
and you also would
Yeah.
say
I
Golokananda?
think yes, because at that time you will not think of anything else. You'll be so absorbed in the holy name, and and you don't even care what's going on in the world.
Right.
When you're really absorbed,
Right.
then you will feel like internal bliss. Like you really don't care what's going on outside.
Exactly. Your
Kirtan.
mind is completely subdued,
Mhm.
and your consciousness is totally Krishna
think more-
conscious.
Yeah. I think also has to do more like internal thing, because externally we cannot control a lot of things. It is not in our control. It is subject to change. So that is like a windy atmosphere. we cannot make it windless even if we try to control things externally. So only thing that we have is we have to control the things, our state of existence, our own internal things. So irrespective of circumstance, things will act like that, like being a lamp without in a windless atmosphere.
Question number 6. Vignesh quoted the actual Sanskrit that all of us seem to like the most, and it's Sukham Atyantikam Yat Tad Buddhi Grahyam Atindriyam. Now, I have a question for Vignesh because he mentioned that this made him think of the bhakti of the gopis of Vrindavan. So, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, like especially when there was a, like when the gopis search Krishna, and when there is a pastimes of Krishna with the gopis in Vrindavan, normally they neglect, they don't care for anything that they have, like it may be with the husband or it may be the son or even for themselves. Now there is a description where gopis are actually imitating Krishna, and they're actually calling themselves Krishna. See, I am Krishna, see how I'm moving. So like they are on a different level of ecstasy. We cannot imitate that, but definitely they are experiencing something that is beyond material happiness. So maybe like Krishna normally says, like in Upanishad there is a verse, Raso vai saha. So once we receive that, Anandi bhavati. So we can experience unlimited happiness. So that is like a rasa which we cannot experience in any material, at a material level. So that is like transcendental happiness.
Transcendental happiness. Exactly. Anything you want to add, Golokananda Priya, to that? You just have to unmute yourself when you speak.
You think about the same, like, you're not concerned about anything external. You see Krishna and everything, and you experience so much happiness, and like you said, so much joy and happiness, and you really, nothing matter, only Krishna matter.
Mm.
Even I just remember that verse, Srimad Bhagavatam 11.14.12. So like Krishna says to Uddhava that those who fix their consciousness on me, giving up all material desire, share with me a happiness that cannot possibly be experienced by those engaged in sense gratification. So that he's talking about the same, that material happiness cannot compare with the transcendental happiness.
I like the word boundless. What does boundless mean?
Without any boundary.
Without any boundary. Oh, yeah, that's pretty intense. In happiness, that's boundless. So, we're getting there, Prabhu's. Like I often say, there's that T-shirt that says, chant Hare Krishna and be happy, or at least chant Hare Krishna. I really like that because it's so honest. Tu t'as entendu parler? C'est cool, huh? Because we're all we want to be there in that boundless transcendental happiness, but let's be honest, most of us are not on that platform, right? But by the mercy of Lord Nityananda, we get some drops and enough to get us out of bed the next morning, an hour before we could sleep in and chant, but still, like the prospect is wonderful. The prospect is wonderful that we can just get to a point where we have boundless transcendental happiness, right? And then once we experience it, we think there's nothing greater, right? There's nothing greater, and this nothing greater is like, it's like once you're there, you're like, oh my God, sense gratification? Are you kidding me? Like, yuck, no way. What's that verse from Yamuna Acharya that I think we were talking about last week? It was part of our reading last week in one of the purports. Prabhupada mentions this famous verse from Yamuna Acharya. Remember?
Things of sex desires, my lip curl, and Prabhupada said, I spite it.
I spit at the thought. I spite at the thought. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we just have to be patient. We'll get there. We'll get there one day. And so finally, this thing about 518 or 629 and 518. Let me go to 629. 629. What's 629 again?
A true yogi observes me in all things. That Samadarshi.
So it's very similar, isn't it, to 518? I forget what you wrote, Vignesh. I remember you made a compliment. You said, very nice question. I felt like I should give you some extra bonus points because you glorified the teacher there. But aside from that glorifying of my false ego, I forgot what you said. Both the verses talk about samadarshina. So both are similar in terms of action or application. However, there's a subtle difference in the bhava. So 518, I'm reading, go look on the pre, I'm reading his answer. 518 describes about the pandita, but it shouldn't be capital P, it should be small p, by the way. And sadhaka also should be small p or small s, because only God has, capital. Just a small little spelling thing. So the pandita, who's a sadhaka of the highest order and is practicing equanimity based on the knowledge received from the scriptural injunctions, it is a conscious effort on his part to see the equality in all the living entities, which has been received after careful deliberation of the words of Shastra. Such a pandit understands that the Lord is situated in all the living entities and tries to act in accordance. Okay, a shadow reflection of Shanti Rasa or Shantarasi. However, 629 here talks about the Jivan Mukta or the Siddha Purusha, the perfected soul. He is no more a sadhaka, for he has realized this knowledge, not just mere having a mere knowledge of it. Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that those who have even surpassed the stage of Shantarati and have become eligible to engage with the Lord in one of the four higher rasas can truly have the vision as described here by Krishna in this and subsequent few verses. Does Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually quote 629?
In the commentary of this verse, the Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions about this.
So you looked at Thakur Bhaktivinoda's commentary on the Gita for this verse?
Yeah.
So you look at all the purport.
Yeah, you look at the Vishwanath Chakravarti also, the last time you quoted.
Yeah, normally I have a couple of one of Baldev Vidyabhushan and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura. So normally I refer that, and I just see a lot of similarities when it comes to Prabhupada explanation. So Prabhupada has heavily taken from all the acharyas as a complete package.
Wonderful. So then 629 being that here we're talking about a self-realized soul, whereas in 518, it's not necessarily a self-realized soul, it's more of a sadhaka. Is that what you're saying?
The learned Brahman.
Yeah. Normally, like when we call a pandit, normally we don't call him like a devotee, right? Like Mahabhagavad, we don't call him a pandit. The pandit is something who acquired knowledge based on the Shastra, from the scripture. So he understands the fact, he understands all the details, also understand the principle, but we have to have a realization practice so that we can actually understand and not just have a dry knowledge. So I think the Siddha Purusha has that realization. He actually seen that presence of Krishna everywhere, and that's how he's moved in that way. What is mentioned in this verse of 6.29.
Nice point. Excellent point. Let's finish by reading 12:13 purport, because Prabhupada quotes my favorite verses from Rupa Goswami about Yukta Vairagya. So I can't miss it. Every time Prabhupada talks about Yukta Vairagya in our reading material, we gotta go to it. So it's in verse 12, I think. No. Oh, I thought it was in 13.
Is that chapter 12?
No, chapter 6. What we just read. What we just read. I thought it was 12:13.
Yeah.
It's in 13?
One should hold one's body. No. Is that just practice constant control body?
Oh, I'm in the
mind?
wrong.
No.
Sorry, I'm in the wrong chapter. Can someone go to 6:13 or 6:12?
Is one should hold one's.
If you look in the purport, you can see whether Prabhupada is referring to the Yukta Vairagya verses. God, that's the problem with the 1972 version. I only have a PDF, so I'm like scrolling.
Yeah, no. 6:13. It's not the
No, what about 12?
Visaya. Yeah.
So it's
Well,
612, right?
612.
613 is here. Visaya Vinirvarate. Is that the one?
No, no,
It's the
no.
Bhagavad Gita.
I'm looking at, hold on,
612.
36. What about you? Can you help us here, Vignesh, or are you
No, which
in
on which context you are
612 or
talking about?
613 around there?
So on
Okay, again,
613, it's a combination, right? The
Yeah.
Prashanta, the two verses together.
And where did I mean? Prabhupada does quote maybe in 12 then. Yes, it's in purport to number 10. Yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasi stita ekaki yata chitatma nirashir api aparigraha. A transcendentalist should always try to concentrate his mind on the Supreme Self. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. So this verse is very much a, go to the Himalayas, go to your tree, get away from society and practice bhajan, right? But let's see how Prabhupada in the purport brings in, Yukta Vairagya. He says, I don't want to read the whole thing because we don't have time. It's already 12:01. But in the which number? In the first, second, third. In the third paragraph, Prabhupada says, I'll share the screen with you. All these perfections, Prabhupada says, all these perfections and precautions are perfectly executed when one is directly in Krishna consciousness, because direct Krishna consciousness means self-abnegation, wherein there is very little chance for material possessiveness. So it's very interesting. It's a question of consciousness. When you're doing everything for Krishna, you can be in the midst of a big city and have fancy clothes and a lot of money, but because you're doing nothing for you and everything for Krishna, these so-called disadvantages are not disadvantages; they're actually advantages. Srila Rupa Goswami characterizes Krishna consciousness in this way: anasyaktasya vishayan, etc. These two very famous verses, 255 and 256. Quote, when one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. So, you're rightly situated above possessiveness, not by renouncing matter necessarily, but rather by having a consciousness where you're not attached to anything for your sense gratification, but you're seeing everything for Krishna's service. On the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation, unquote. A Krishna conscious person well knows that everything belongs to Krishna, and thus he is always free from feelings of personal possession. So again, it's not a question of, like Prabhupada once said that, even a beggar in a train station in Calcutta, who had a piece of coal, a worthless piece of, burnt piece of wood, coal. But, he was really attached to that piece of coal, which is worthless, but he's possessive. And yet, the other example is Yudhishthir Maharaj, who's the emperor of the entire planet. Talk about being rich, but he's above possessiveness because he sees everything as belonging to Krishna and meant for Krishna's service. So it's really a question of consciousness. As such, he has no hankering for anything on his personal own account. He knows how to accept things in favor of Krishna consciousness and how to reject things unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. He is always aloof from material things because he is always transcendental, and he is always alone, having nothing to do with persons not in Krishna consciousness. So again, being alone means basically you're picking your association carefully, you're giving your association to non-devotees. Doesn't necessarily mean you go to the forest. You're in this world, but you're not of this world. Therefore, a person in Krishna consciousness is the perfect yogi. Isn't it wonderful how Prabhupada is able to, contextualize this verse in the context of a modern devotee life?
Yeah.
Okay, Prabhus. Let's do 2 minutes of kirtan. I'll chant again real quick, and then we're done. So if you can mute yourselves, and then just do a couple of minutes. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita ki Jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Prabhu, thank you very much.
Thank
See
you.
you
Thank you, Hare
next week
Krishna,
or the
Prabhu.
week later. Jai. Hari Bol,
Thank you.
Golokanath Priya. Hari Bol,
Hare
thank you.
Krishna.